Taiwan has released the National Action Plan according to the Open Government Standard, and it is expected to complete by 2024. From the online participation platform to civic take during pandemic, Taiwan has been working on open government and citizen participation for the past decade. With 1 year preparation, Open Government National Action Plan Task Force has convened several meetings with civil society after soliciting for people's opinions online. And now, 19 commitments are getting into our plan for the future.
In Taiwan, we think of democracy itself as a kind of applied social technology that improves as people contribute to it. So just like semiconductor design, anyone can invent new ways of doing democracy, and that has become part of our political culture. The Taiwanese people care about open government principles, and we can help you to make it also fast, fair, fun for your people.
Ensuring Taiwan's experience and progress in open government creates more opportunities to be visible, furtherly makes changes together with the international society. Taiwan can help!
Hi, can everybody hear me? Sorry about the technical issues. Welcome back. My name is Hsin-cheng Hsiao. I will be your moderator for the afternoon's panel. And apologies once again for the little technical difficulties with the audio. For the afternoon session, our topic will be the very foundation of governance, anti-corruption, and transparency. And it is my honor to welcome our first speaker, Deputy Minister of Department of Justice in Taiwan, who is also a member of Taiwan's Open Government Multi-Stakeholder Forum member. Deputy Minister Tsai was an experienced prosecutor, serving as assistant prosecutor in Penghu, Yunlin, Jiayi, and also is a vice president of Taiwan Bar Association. So it is my honor to introduce Deputy Minister Tsai, and let's hear Deputy Minister Tsai.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my great honor to be joining such a major online international conference on behalf of the Ministry of Justice. The Taiwanese government has been actively promoting open government strategies in recent years, declaring at the OGP Global Summit in May 2019 that it plans to develop its own open government national action plan. After 1 year of holding discussions with the private sector and within different government departments, we officially established the National Action Plan Task Force of the Executive Yen in August 2020 and implemented the first open government national action plan of Taiwan in January 2021. The action plan consists of 19 commitments in 5 categories, which are respectively promotion, open data, and freedom of information, broadening the scope of the civic participation, holding more gender and race-inclusive compositions, ensuring politics of integrity, and implementing anti-money laundering measures. As the complement authority of anti-money laundering and with agents against corruption, subordinate Ministry of Justice being responsible for establishing and implementing national anti-corruption policies. Ministry of Justice should undertake the responsibility of the step-by-step fulfillment of the items of ensuring policies of integrity and implementing anti-money laundering measures mentioned in the Open Government National Action Plan. To ensure the quality of public construction projects, provide our people with a quality living environment, and improve Taiwan's competitiveness, Ministry of Justice announced the government procurement integrity platform plan in 2016 under the command of the Executive Yen to assist official departments in establishing integrity platforms, as well as mechanism for cross-departmental collaboration, public and private sector collaboration, transparent administration, and public supervision in regard to major national construction and procurement projects. The plan not only allows the prosecutor's office and the agency against corruption to participate in the investigation of major construction projects, but also facilitated the participation of professional institutes such as construction commission, experts, scholars, and civic groups. Furthermore, through upholding the principle of data transparency, we eliminate illegitimate external interventions to provide a safe workplace in which our colleagues can feel encouraged to shoulder responsibilities, perform their duties, and protect the rights of external collaborating partners. Such partners can then focus on fulfilling their contracts, thus allowing major national construction projects to be completed on time with high quality and integrity, and providing our people with excellent public construction. Ministry of Justice will not wane in its efforts to improve anti-corruption measures through the core principle of treating both due causes and their symptoms, and promoting key anti-corruption, corruption prevention, and corruption investigation policies. We will improve and expand the scope of the current procurement integrity platform and promote corruption awareness in corporations, schools, and communities, so as to gradually foster public awareness. In so doing, we can create a society that does not tolerate corruption, that's curbing illegal and illegitimate behaviors in both the public and private sectors, while at the same time ensuring human rights and creating a country of high integrity and advanced rule of law. Anti-money laundering is major policy of Taiwan. To abide by international anti-money laundering regulations, combat crimes, and eradicate money laundering to bolster economic growth. Since 2017, Ministry of Justice has collaborated with other ministries of the Executive Yen to amend the Money Laundering Control Act, among close to 100 other statutes, thereby constructing a lawful framework for anti-money laundering. Meanwhile, our efforts have also gained us the recognition of international organizations. In APG's third-round mutual evaluation in 2019, Taiwan was determined to have comply with 76 technical compliance rating and 7 effectiveness ratings, and also achieve the highest overall grade of regular follow-up. Despite the fact that the concept of anti-money laundering comes from abroad, the Taiwanese government hopes that in addition to abiding by applicable laws, the Taiwanese hope can all gain a basic understanding of the concept, as only in this way will the concept of anti-money laundering be able to effectively take root in Taiwan. The data transparency of beneficial owners in the core principle of anti-money laundering. Only through the data transparency of beneficial owners can elicit money laundering activities, such as through the use of dummy companies to hide the ultimate beneficial owner, be reviewed and investigated in the charitable trust system introduced into Taiwan in 1994. According to the statistics of Q2 2021, the number of charitable trust cases was 255. Find the total trust assets amounted to NT 72.7 billion, as charitable trust has gradually gained popularity. In order to avoid regulation abuse, the government has in recent years been committed to promoting the data transparency of beneficial owners, for which in addition to publishing disclosing the data of trustees and the beneficial owners that are non-natural persons, Ministry of Justice is currently amending trust law by adding draft amendments that require trustees to disclose certain information. As Taiwan's Open Government National Action Plan was officially launched this year, moving forward, Ministry of Justice will commit itself to realizing the commitments of the plan and working together with both the public and the private sectors to meet our people's expectation of politics of integrity and a more transparent open government. Lastly, I wish you all good health and the best of luck with everything. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much for Deputy Minister Tsai Bi-chung's opening remark summarizing Taiwan's effort in anti-corruption in our open government National Action Plan commitments. Next, we will enter into our keynote section titled Political Integrity and Beneficial Ownership. And it is my honor to welcome our first speaker, François Valérian. Let me briefly introduce François. Is a professor of finance, regulation, and governance at École des Mines de Paris and CAAM in France, an author and the editor-in-chief of the French scientific journal Annales des Mines. Now let's turn the floor to François for his talk titled, now let's turn the floor to François. Thank you.
Okay, so good afternoon to my Taiwanese friends and good morning to others in other parts of the world. So thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'd like also to mention that I'm speaking here as a member of the International Board of Transparency International, the leading coalition against corruption worldwide. So I would like to thank the Open Culture Foundation and the National Development Council of Taiwan for their kind invitation to participate in this important Open Government International Virtual Forum. I would also like to greet the other participants in this session, and in particular my colleague Ieva Dunčikaitė from Transparency International Lithuania, a Transparency International chapter very active on open government as well as on other topics. The topic of open government has been at the heart of Transparency International's concerns since its inception in 1993. And the fight for open government is being waged in each of the 100 countries where we are present. Why is this? Because, as was also implied by Deputy Justice Minister Tsai Pi-Chung, fighting against corruption is fighting for open government. It is important to appreciate the paradigm shift that has occurred in recent decades as a result of the combined efforts of many civil society organizations on all continents. The traditional state and governmental culture in most countries, until well into the last century, and still today in too many countries, has been a culture of secrecy. Nothing was to be said or written of deliberations held in the greatest secrecy, and often the decisions themselves were secret, especially the most important ones. Secrecy was supposed to be the best weapon of a power that was not shared with anyone, and especially not with the people. And this secrecy was also presented, and often still is, as a guarantee of efficiency, as we shall see later. The paradigm shift consists in having replaced state secrecy with governmental accountability. It was a matter of recognizing that the government did not have exclusive rights to the general interest, and that civil society, that is to say the people outside of all economic and political power, had its say, always and on every subject, beyond the ballot box. But for the people to have their say, they must have access to information. The principle of public access to information has become one of the essential principles of modern democracies, so much so that the speed and reliability of administrative responses to public requests is now one of the most important aspects of the rule of law and open government. This transparency also and above all concerns the documents underlying public decisions, which must be immediately accessible when they affect the lives of citizens. The right of access to information is individual, but an open state cannot keep society fragmented. The civil society cannot do without associations, organizations, that we name non-governmental, but that must be in fact independent of any power, political or economic. These associations meet. Sometimes they demonstrate. Sometimes they publish opinions that differ from those expressed by the powers. And so they do all sorts of things that have been made difficult by health policies almost everywhere in the world over the last 20 months. The point here is not to criticize these policies, but the use by some governments of the health crisis as a pretext to plunge the life of the citizenry into agony. This pretext has sometimes gone as far as the brutal repression of civil society, with meetings interrupted, premises closed, activists arrested. This is a more general problem and one that did not begin with the health crisis. Open government is not the surveillance society, and one of the main duties of policymakers is to find the right balance between protecting against certain threats, such as terrorism, and preserving sufficient space for civil society. The more we treat civil society as a full and essential partner in public life, the more civil society contributes positively to this same public life. Civil societies and the associations that make it up are indeed the natural interlocutors of public authorities in the process of elaborating administrative decisions and regulations, laws, and even constitutions. I'm thinking of the Icelandic constitution, the first in the world that in 2009 was drafted by crowdsourcing and a massive consultation of civil society via the internet. And more recently, I'm thinking of the new Chilean constitution, which is being drafted after civil society expressed its deep desire for a government closer to the citizens. The action of civil society is obviously facilitated and accelerated by the internet, social networks, and in general, the instantaneous circulation of information. The new technological possibilities make it much easier to communicate, consult, and take into account various contributions. This is a fundamental change, since governments can no longer hide behind the argument of efficiency to defend secrecy. In the digital age, efficient government is open government. It is also a government that helps to expose the corrupt and gives them fewer opportunities. An open government is one that shares its secrets and at the same time accepts that those secrets are open to criticism. It is a government that accepts to say where its income comes from and where its expenses go. And it is also a government whose members in the broadest sense, parliamentarians, ministers, declare their secondary income, their assets, the economic interests to which they are linked. An open and transparent government can only be made of open and transparent individuals, ready to disclose, above a certain threshold of responsibilities or mandate, their revenue, interests, and assets. Once elected or appointed, those individuals have to decide. Before they decide, they consult various stakeholders, and this is normal, part of their job and normal political work. This part, however, also has to be transparent. This is transparency of lobbying, with lobbying registries and the possibility for each citizen to know who met whom, when, and on what topic. Open government is indeed a government with open procedures. Transparency is something that should not remain at the level of fine principles, but should be anchored in concrete practice. One of these concrete practices, maybe one of the most important ones, is open contracting. A recent standard of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, the world's largest multi-stakeholder initiative for transparency in the extractive industries, states that all EITI implementing countries and companies should publish all contracts entered into or modified as of 2021. Respect for the law is the absolute minimum we should expect from any company, but corporations should go beyond legal compliance and adhere to ethical principles. One of those principles tells us that all contracts entered into by the government, by a public entity, with any other entity, whether private or public, should be published. Why? Because public entities are accountable to the public at large. They also often lack the skills and resources needed to successfully negotiate with private interests. Private companies can choose whether or not to disclose their transactions to their shareholders because they are sensitive to the risk of informing their competitors, and this is the main argument used by companies that still resist public disclosure of contracts with government. This is their point of view, but their public co-contractors have to follow another logic that should prevail over the private one in any political society that respects citizens' rights. A contract entered into by a public entity, even with a private entity, should be made public, because, like everything else done by a public entity, it affects the lives of citizens. If all oil contracts were public, their provisions could be compared from one contract to another, and it would be much more difficult to sign contracts that were disproportionately favorable to private interests. Suspicion of dishonest or corrupt deals would also decrease. In the frenzied years leading up to the 2008 global financial crisis, JP Morgan, the world's largest banking conglomerate, managed to conclude a financial derivatives contract with BVG, the public entity that manages Berlin's public transport system in Germany. Through this contract, BVG received a comfortable regular income by agreeing to insure JP Morgan against default on complex debt products. As the products defaulted due to the crisis, JP Morgan sued BVG for more than $200 million before dropping the lawsuit in the public outcry about having signed such a contract with a public transportation company. If the Berlin BVG had made the contract public as soon as it was signed, citizens could have warned the authorities of its consequences and obtained its renegotiation or cancellation. If the BVG's managers had known that the contract would be published, would they even have signed it? Is this all in the distant past? A recent study by Transparency International shows that out of a sample of 27 major European cities, only 1/3 published their contracts on the internet sufficiently and in a suitable format. If all of the corrupt contracts entered into by Brazilian public works giant Odebrecht with public entities in Latin America and Africa had been subject to mandatory publication, they might have been signed under different terms. If all contracts signed between governments and pharmaceutical companies for vaccines and treatments against COVID-19 were published, instead of being hidden, as is very often the case, there would be more competition and lower prices. There would be less corruption, and prices would be even lower and more lives would be saved. Asymmetry between private and public interests has always been a powerful driver of uneven transactions. This asymmetry is also informational, and it is well known in economics that transactions characterized by informational asymmetry must present certain guarantees for the least informed party. In addition to informational asymmetry, the obvious lack of financial skills and sometimes negotiation skills on the part of public entities further strengthens the argument in favor of publishing public contracts. The publication of these contracts is the best guarantee of a fair deal. It is also the guarantee of efficient public services when those are being contracted to private entities in water, sanitation, health, sometimes education. Contracting with private entities should serve public interest, not harming it to the exclusive benefit of private interests. Publishing public contracts obviously strengthens the negotiating capacity of the public authorities with private interests and ensures that citizens receive better value for money, more precisely, better social value for public money spent. A government that systematically publishes its contracts is much more respecting in the bidding or negotiation process, because the bidders know that the result will be scrutinized by the public at large. So, by publishing contracts, the government invites the entire population to the negotiating table. This is an essential aid to good government, a very strong threat to bad government. Transparent contracting is essential. What is essential as well, and goes with it, is contracting with transparent company. An open government is an entity open by itself, but whose mission is also to ensure openness and transparency of the main economic actors. What is a transparent company? First and foremost, it is a company whose ultimate beneficiaries are known. The Financial Action Task Force is currently defining a standard for the disclosure of these beneficial owners. This is a very important issue because without knowing the ultimate beneficiaries, anyone can hide behind a company, give a contract to a company to which he or she is related, buy a building or a company with illicit money. All the governments of the world, without exception, must obtain from the resident companies or those that do business in their jurisdictions the disclosures of their beneficial owners. This is crucial because just as bad money drives out good, bad government drives out good. As soon as a government offers opportunities to bad people that are not offered by other governments, the bad government attracts financial flows that do not benefit others and provides to the other governments an incentive to relax regulatory efforts and become bad governments themselves. An essential aspect of disclosure of beneficial ownership is that it be done on publicly available registers. As with open contracting, it is about inviting the public to the table. The public interest is never as strong as when it is transparent. Disclosure of beneficial owners will only be fully effective when the public is able to monitor it. The global civil society campaign to obtain beneficial owner registries has borne fruits. However, in many jurisdictions, these registries are not yet freely accessible by the public. The degree of enforcement of sanctions for non-compliance is unknown, and public registries would be a powerful means of achieving compliance. In several jurisdictions, public registries are only planned for an uncertain future and under the condition that a global standard has been agreed upon. The precise conditions for future public access to the registries are still largely unknown. Also very concerning is that in many, if not most jurisdictions, sanctions for non-compliance with beneficial ownership disclosure are non-existent or non-deterrent enough. This is an issue of governmental openness, financial integrity, and also an issue of development. The money that is hidden under secret identities would be much better used for real economic purposes under the aegis of open governments, not allowing secrecy to be the standard of many financial transactions. In addition to enforcement of sanctions for non-compliance and effective publicity of registries, banks' enduring relationships with and financial exposure to jurisdictions that do not seem to seriously implement beneficial ownership registries are highly questionable. Non-financial companies, particularly those operating in sectors with high corruption risks, should also reconsider their presence in jurisdictions that cannot demonstrate that they implement beneficial ownership regulations. A few words in conclusion. An open government is not a closed one, which means that it has to entertain a permanent dialogue. This multi-stakeholder dialogue, which has been our core belief and practice within Transparency International for the last 30 years. A dialogue with civil society and business. Also a dialogue with the other governments in an effort, today may be more necessary than ever, of international peaceful cooperation, a cooperation to which your beautiful conference attests. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, François, Valérian, for the insightful talk, sharing with us the practice of open governance and anti-corruption. I would like to remind the member in the audience to ask questions of our speakers, including the Deputy Minister Tsai, by going to our Slido website. The URL can be accessed through the QR code. And also, I would like to encourage our speakers to ask questions, among ourselves, especially toward the Deputy Minister Tsai, because part of the purpose of today's forum is to encourage, exchanges of ideas between Taiwan's government officials with the civil societies around the globe. So, with that, I would like to move to our next section. Next panelist would be Ieva Dunčikaitė, and from Lithuania. Briefly introduce Ieva leads various initiatives on open data for transparency and anti-corruption and political integrity at Transparency International Lithuania. And her talk will be titled "Ensuring Public Access to Beneficial Ownership Data: Lessons Learned in Lithuania." Please welcome Ieva to the stage.
Hello, everyone. It is my great pleasure to virtually be here, and thank you, organizers, for the invitation. As Transparency International Lithuania for the past few years, we have been actively advocating for access to data, access to information that is important to public interest and transparency. And beneficial ownership transparency was one of the main pillars in this journey. As you know, understanding who the true owners of companies are is key for money laundering systems that are very crucial to corruption prevention. Next slide, please. While it is very difficult to grasp the exact amount of money laundered, the UN estimates that globally it could be between 800 billion to 2 trillion US dollars every year. So it's huge numbers. Some scientists say that for that kind of money every year, we could possibly stop world hunger or majorly contribute to tackling global warming. So Lithuania is no exception. As pretty much any other country, we are also prone to money laundering, to tax evasion and corruption as well. To address that issue, one of the things that we did as an EU member state, we transposed European Union AML, anti-money laundering directives that require to create beneficial ownership register and make it publicly available. However, I have to admit that we did not manage to create the register on time. And according to our current OGP National Action Plan, we should have it at the beginning of next year. So in our case, having legal documents, obligations has not been a silver bullet. But at the same time, we learned valuable lessons, and I'm very happy to share them today with you. So I think that while we have been advocating for beneficial ownership transparency in Lithuania, we learned two main things. So first of all, it is very important to agree on who is responsible for money laundering prevention and anti-corruption in your country, in our country, or in any other country that is dealing with this topic. And second, I believe that it's very important to agree what data is necessary for public interest and to make sure that we have it open. And beneficial ownership data is one of those key elements that I do believe should not only be accessible to law enforcement institutions, but also to the public. But as we already heard before from my colleague, and as we learned here in the European Union, that it is not that easy, and many countries have been failing to open beneficial ownership registers. So I think what worked in Lithuania to put this on the agenda was bringing issue more to home. And I would like to share with you 2 initiatives that very clearly showed why having such data is important for public interest and why we also need to agree what is responsible for anti-corruption. So during one of our latest initiatives on money laundering in real estate sector, we did desk research, had qualitative interviews with the experts in the field, and also gathered data via information requests to various authorities. Next slide, please. And one of the first things that we learned, and it's not going to be a surprise, that in Lithuania, we do not actually know the extent of money laundered in real estate. Some experts said that it could be proportionate to that in other European countries, as Lithuania's issues are usually the same, just smaller in proportion, but we don't know the actual extent of it. Next slide, please. In addition, we also learned that institutions in charge do not cooperate enough, and that is very important to improve the availability and quality of the data that we also already have in order to have a better prevention, a better monitoring of money laundering. And finally, next slide, please. Our representatives from the institutions that we interviewed were very clear that data on beneficial ownership is crucial and plays a really important role. I was especially surprised when I heard that people such as notaries that are directly involved in money in real estate sector said that for them it is also difficult to verify sometimes who the true owners are, and that even they have to pay to get this kind of data, and then sometimes it is not even of good quality. So once again, it showed that we must have beneficial ownership registers, and we must also open them. And there is another part also of beneficial ownership transparency when we talk about it, that is also very crucial for open government. And we also as taxpayers should know where our money is spent and who receives it. And that is one of the reasons why also identifying owners of companies that are closest to us, such as state-owned and municipality-owned enterprises, is also very important. And we should know who ultimately belong to the public. So a few years back in Lithuania, we did another exercise where we try to understand what owns those companies. So we gathered data about the executives of 100 largest municipality-owned enterprises and state-owned enterprises in Lithuania, trying to understand what is the likelihood of possible conflicts of interest and politicization. We wanted to understand who are the executives and whether they went to elections with certain political parties, political groups. Would not seem such a difficult task since we are talking about a public interest, but actually it took more than 100 information requests to those companies and some data matching to only grasp who ultimately controls state-owned enterprises and municipality-owned enterprises, showing that more transparency is necessary in order to better manage possible conflicts of interest, prevent fraud, and ensure accountability to clients and citizens. Next slide, please. So from this data, we were able to see that 1 out of 10 state-owned and 4 out of 10 municipality-owned enterprise executives were connected to political parties in 2019. Next slide, please. And overall, at least 3 out of 10 SOE and MOE CEOs were affiliated with political parties, meaning that they have previously participated in elections with a political party or coalition. And in comparison, in 2017, we have even larger numbers of such connections. So 4 out of 10 executives had such connections. Thus, as you can see from 2 examples in Lithuania, understanding corporate structures and who ultimately owns not only big business companies, but also the ones closest to us, has not been the easiest task. Sometimes it felt like climbing a mountain in the dark. Well, we don't really have mountains in Lithuania, more like hills. But going through all this data and trying to obtain this data, for me, is at least how I would imagine climbing the mountain in the dark feels like. However, at the same time, it allowed us to create better working relationships with various institutions, obtain valuable data, spot the red flags, and advocate for beneficial ownership, transparency, and overall for access to data that is important to public interest. Thus, I'm very glad that Lithuania is now one of the 32 other OGP countries committing to ensure public access to beneficial ownership data through the OGP action plans, what essentially I hope will help to keep public money where it belongs, in the service of taxpayers. However, once we move forward, I would also suggest to think about increasing the quality and interoperability of data, such as using beneficial ownership data standard to be able to search and cross-reference globally. This is the data, once again, that is important for public interest. But well, for now, I'm really happy that we have this international event, that we have OGP platform, our global laboratory, which helps to understand what really works and what doesn't, and keep learning from each other while we are searching for the best practices today and the upcoming years. Thank you very much. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them. And in the next slide, you can see also my contacts in case you would have any other questions afterwards. I believe we cannot hear the moderator. I don't know if it's only me.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm back. Thank you again. Thank you, Ieva, for your insightful talk. And I would like to remind again in the members of the audience that to ask your questions on our online platform Slido, and you can access the link via the chat room. So feel free to ask any questions about speakers today. And next, we'll move towards the next panelist. It will be hosted by Yen-Chun, who is the head prosecutor in the Department of Prosecutorial Affairs, Ministry of Justice in Taiwan, and also the Department of Civil Affairs, Ministry of Interior in Taiwan. Please let the head prosecutor Yen-Chun welcome her to the stage. Thank you.
Hello, everyone who gathered here today for the subject of Open Government National Action Plan. Good afternoon. I'm extremely honored and grateful to attend this seminar on behalf of Taiwan's Ministry of Justice to share Taiwan's legal progress in combating money laundering in recent years, as well as the commitment that Taiwan made to money laundering prevention in our Open Government National Action Plan. Taiwan's Money Laundering Control Act was formulated as early as 1996. We were one of the earliest countries to establish a special law for money laundering. However, as technology gave rise to newer forms of money laundering, the Money Laundering Control Act became outdated compared with international regulation and was insufficient to address complex money laundering crimes. In light of this, in 2017, Taiwan made money laundering prevention a pivotal government policy. With the joint effort of the Ministry of Justice and many other competent authorities, we were able to aid and amend many legal acts, including Money Laundering Control Act. In a short span of years, our efforts also received international recognition. In 2018, Taiwan underwent the third round mutual evaluation held by the APG in technical and effectiveness compliance rating. Taiwan met 7 substantial and 36 compliance and largely compliance, placing the nation in the best performed country group of regular follow-up in the review. Transparency of beneficial ownership information is critical for combating money laundering because knowing where the money ends up can help unveil the true criminal behind the scene. Following the 40 recommendation of FATF, Taiwan's Money Laundering Control Act, in its paragraph 1 of Article 7, stipulate the CDD progress on a risk-based approach, which includes the identity verification of beneficial ownership. However, frontline workers tasked to perform the identity verification as one of the most challenging duties because they did not have the public right to conduct a compulsory investigation. They thought, without sufficient supporting measure to carry out beneficial ownership's identity verifying was difficult. As one of the response, the Company Act was added Article 22.1 in 2018, which required companies to report annually and electronically information regarding its director, supervisor, shareholders holding more than 10% of total shares of a company on the government website, which is called CTP platform. The Company Act also stipulates fines for violators who fail to fulfill their duty to report such information. The platform was launched in February 2019. It was first opened to FI and DNFBP and expanded to law enforcement and the Ministry of Economic Affairs later. They can apply for an account to conduct inquiries on a paid basis and use the data as reference for the identity verification of beneficial ownership. Law enforcement can use the platform to support money laundering investigation as well. However, the information enterprises are required to report on the platform is limited, who might not necessarily be the beneficial owners. In cases where there are complicated cross-shareholding structure in the legal persons, multiple inquiries will be required to try and get to the bottom of it. Despite so, the establishment of the platform still marks an important step in Taiwan's effort toward enhance beneficial ownership transparency in legal persons. International standards and the voice of the people in Taiwan have always been the guiding post for Taiwanese government while we are planning the policy and regulation. Take the addition of Article 22.1 of the Company Act, for example. It was drafted in order to follow the FATF recommendation, but facing a sharp divide appeared between the government and the business sector concerning the scope required for reporting. Government faced a strong force of resistance from the industry. After continuous communication and negotiation, both sides came to a consensus, which is the current version we see in the Company Act. From the launch of the platform until now, the reporting rate was over 90%. It could be seen that local companies were highly compliant with the legal requirement. Article 22.1 in the Company Act bears significance for enhanced transparency on beneficial ownership in 3 ways. First, it provides objective reference information for frontline workers conducting beneficial ownership's identity verification. Secondly, it raises legal person transparency by increasing money laundering costs and difficulty. Thirdly, the accuracy, timeliness, and integrity of report data is ensured as the platform allows users to make inquiries and report abnormality for further inspection. According to the statistic data of notification of abnormal, in 2020, there are more than 1,000 records, and 2021, there are 231 records, which means that the FI and DNFBP didn't totally rely on CTP platform during beneficial ownership review. When they found the data that company reported was incorrect or didn't match with what they knew, they still can conduct a substantive review. This brings us to the commitment that Taiwan made in our Open Government National Action Plan. That is, to expand the use of data on a company transparency platform. The aim is to prevent the creation of dummy companies and to increase cash flow and legal person transparency by training business and personnel required by the Money Laundering Control Act to conduct the CDD progress, to best utilize the data offered by CTP platform. The second commitment in Taiwan's Open Government National Action Plan in this subject is the data disclosure of charitable trust. The idea of charitable trust was introduced to Taiwan in 1994. The philanthropic nature entitled them to tax benefits. As of Season 2 of 2021, there are 255 charitable trusts, which a combined value of more than 72 billion NT dollars. This figure is very high. If the beneficial ownership information of charitable trusts is not disclosed, it may be misused for crime. To promote beneficial ownership transparency of charitable trust, currently, the information on the trustees and non-nature person beneficial owners of charitable trust is publicly disclosed on the website of Trust Enterprise and the Trust Association. To further the effort, the MOJ is promoting an amendment of trust law that incorporates the requirement of information disclosure of charitable trust. The information required for online public disclosure by charitable trusts includes trust deeds, wills, declaration, contents, grants, and donation list financial statements. If the draft passes the lawmaking process, the power of public supervision will be introduced to charitable trust, subjecting charitable trust to be triple monitoring of competent authorities, trust supervisors, and the public. This not only helps facilitate true charity, prevention charitable trust from being abused, but also reflect the open government value of transparency, public participation, and accountability. Open government policy have an important role to play in Taiwan. Taiwan made an effort to combat money laundering and increase beneficial ownership transparency in recent years. To increase cash flow and legal person transparency is our commitment, also the challenge in the future. To this end, Taiwan will continue to work with other countries on this path. Today, we will honor having many experts from home and abroad in the audience. Any feedback or discussion is welcome. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Head Prosecutor Lane, for sharing of valuable lessons in our open government's commitments. And next up, we will welcome Chao-Hua from the Department of Civil Affairs in the Ministry of Interior from Taiwan. Please have Chu on the stage. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to share here. Now I share my video so you can see the whole screen. Policies on financial transparency of religious groups. Briefly outline. 1. The origins of the policies. First, Foundations Act. Foundations Act is the sanction law that all people in Taiwan expect. The most concerned is the financial disclosure provisions of Article 25 and 26. However, Article 75 stipulates that religious foundations do not apply to this law and should be separately ruled. Therefore, the focus of social attention began to focus on how to effectively supervise the finances of religious foundations. Second, APG Third Round Mutual Evaluation of Anti-Money Laundering, Countering Terrorism of Financing. In 2018, it is Taiwan's turn to participate in the APG Third Round Mutual Evaluation. The evaluation of NPO is an important part of the APG evaluation. According to the 40 recommendations from FATF, of which the 8 recommendation guides, religious foundations must still cooperate in dealing with AML. MOI therefore made the supervision guideline. So the current AML work of religious groups is based on the requirements of the international organization FATF for international members. Third, Open Government National Action Plan. In 2020, the National Development Council decided to propose Taiwan's first National Action Plan for Open Government. From February 27 to March 6, in the Public Policy Network Participation Platform, Mr. Xu suggested that the financial transparency policy of religious group should be promoted. On October 28, 2020, the Executive Yuan opened the government's first meeting of the National Action Plan Promotion Group. MOI, Taiwan's highest religious authority, was listed as the authority and the responsibility to promote the financial transparency policy of religious group. Two, the actual situation. Taiwan is a free and a democratic country governed by law. The promotion of a financial transparency policy for religious groups involves many complex aspects, such as: first, religious freedom. Article 13 of the Constitution stipulates freedom of religious belief. Interpretation number 573 had indicated that the government's intervention in religious affairs must be limited to preserve religious freedom and major public welfare, and must adopt methods that minimize damage. The government should respect organizational autonomy, personnel autonomy, and the financial autonomy of religious groups. Two, the principle of separation of church and state. In Western history, the struggle for democracy and freedom of nation-states was accompanied by Protestant's struggle for religious freedom. Therefore, the relationship and the boundary between policies and religion are related to the development of religious freedom and democratic freedom. Only with reasonable boundaries can religious freedom and democratic values be preserved. Third, the nature of religious groups. The funds of public welfare groups come from the general public, and it is very reasonable to disclose their finances to the source of donation for religious groups is limited to a small group of their own followers, not the general public. Donations from believers are not for charity, but for giving thanks and praising for blessings. They are all self-interested donations, rather than altruistic donations. Therefore, the way religious groups must use donations is not the focus of the believer's concern. Fourth, ruled by civil code. Before the separate religious law is legislated, the religious foundations are ruled by civil code. At present, MOI can only stipulate supervision guidelines for religious groups handling of financial inspection and AML work. 3. Current achievement. MOI has used the utmost enthusiasm and active communication attitude to convey the benefits of financial transparency to religious groups and constantly coach the religious groups to promote financial transparency, and the following results have been achieved. First, entrust the accountants to inspect the financial situation of the national religious foundations. It is prepared a budget of NT 6 million. It will combine various types of religious organizations, local governments, accountants, and the executive rank AML office to jointly implement the policies of religious groups' financial transparency. 4. Work overview this year. MOI has 6 specific commitments of the Open Government National Action Plan. This year, MOI has completed the first item, formulate the MOI subsidy plan for the financial condition improvement of religious foundations and temples in 2021. Second item, 2 sharing sessions on improving financial conditions be held in Zhongtaishan on November 12 and in the Catholic Diocese of Hsinchu on November 18. And the third item, 6 campaigns and training sessions on AML for religious foundations and temples. Other items are actively planning and processing. They are expected to be completed before the end of May in 2024. Here are the photos of 6 campaigns and training sessions. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Chu from the Department of Interior, for sharing of what the ministry is doing in the open government commitment in this regard. Now we will move into the QA session. Can we queue up the questions from the Slido? Great. Right. And since some of the questions are in Chinese, do we have some help with the translations? I think we have same, right? It's the same. Or we can start with the English ones first. So how about the besides the government and the citizens, how to involve the private sectors in beneficial ownership regulations? They are mentioned much less. I'll open up to the panelists if any of you want to take these questions.
Well, I'm fine with addressing this first question if you wish. So in terms of the religious groups, I think that what is important to know is what we want to pursue with beneficial ownership. We want to identify the individuals behind the company. So what matters is to know the individual identities. So now if there are associations behind the companies, and if the associations are transparent enough for us to know what associations they are, and here we may have religious groups, that's fine, but we know that these associations or churches or whatever are behind the companies. But I don't think we want to enter into distinguishing between churches, religions, etc. It's, as everybody knows here, a divisive issue. What is the common issue and the universal issue is to identify the individuals behind the companies.
Thank you, François, for the answer. Does anyone else want to elaborate?
I can also talk about the private sector a little bit. So I think there are two things. One is how do we create this behavioral change? Because now we sometimes forget somehow that transparency is a good thing. So I think this is very important to talk about it both with private sector and public sector representatives, because the relationship between them is what matters. So, for example, what we do in Lithuania, and I know other Transparency International chapters also do, we do assessments every few years of the largest companies in Lithuania and see how accountable they are, whether they publish their corporate structures, whether they publish their financial statements, whether they have anti-corruption programs. And actually, we have started seeing the behavioral change throughout the years, because when we did it in 2014, very little companies disclosed something, and then we saw increase throughout the years, and actually more and more of them are disclosing information. So I think this change is also happening, and I think it's also very important if we talk about beneficial ownership, transparency, and making private sector not to have sanctions, but be willing to disclose such information.
Thank you, Ieva, for answering this question. And let's move on to the second question, which is in Chinese, and I'll roughly translate. So in countries like France and Lithuania, in dealing with the okay, Sam, Sam, you want to translate? And I want to add that for our friends from the Ministry of Interior and Justice, that we can answer in Chinese, and our interpreter, Sam, will interpret your answer for you. Okay, please, Sam.
Great. So the question is, so when we actually try to implement these kind of conflicts of interest or corruption or anti-money laundering policies, open government policies in France or Lithuania or any other countries, is there any examples of kind of conflicts or difficulties of cooperation between local and central governments?
Yes. Does anyone feel like taking on this question? 法务部跟内政部的朋友也可以用中文回答。Yes. No, it's okay. And how about let's move on to the third question. It's about religious groups, right? Can we have a translation on that question as well?
Yeah. So religious foundations aren't subject to laws regarding foundations. So does the Ministry of the Interior have kind of a more active method of dealing with them?
Yes, so the Ministry of Interior is mentioned, yes. Okay, please go ahead.
Yes. Okay, yes, Religions Foundation, about Foundations Act, Article 75 stipulates that religious foundation is not applied to this law. So we entrust accountants to check and inspect the all national religious foundations. So we have a higher principle to inspect and to supervise. 就是用中文来说，就是当财团法人法排除了中央财团法人以后，其实我们有一个更高的标准，我们是用预算去委托会计师实际的去查核这些中央财团法人的财务。那事实上刚才也有说过，其实宗教它是很特殊，它有宗教自由，它有政教分立的一些原则，而且它的捐款性质就是并不是这么的自利性的捐款，它是比较应该说它比较是自利性的捐款，不是一个利他性的捐款，所以它的公益性其实是不太一样的。The religious groups, the donation is self-interested donations, not altruistic donations. It's public welfare is not a public group. 这先简单回应到这边。Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer from the Ministry of Interior. And for our last question, I think it's directed to our Ministry of Justice. Can Sam have a translation on that as well? Sam, you muted. Okay, I think we don't have Sam.
Sorry, sorry. I just cut out for a second. Which question are we looking at?
The last one. The one with
okay.
So,
你说当初那个还是实质受益人？
实质受益人这个。
Oh, so the Ministry of Law is the kind of organization in charge of these recommendations and regarding beneficiaries. So with regards to the anti-money laundering system in place by the 行政院是 by 行政院 is it able for the administrative yuan to participate since the systems to manage these are in the Ministry of Law?
Okay, can we have Prosecutor Lin take on this one?
Okay. The beneficial ownership commitment is part of the policy under the anti-money laundering, and the Ministry of Justice is a competent authority of Money Laundering Control Act, and the Money Laundering Prevention Office is a task organization responsible for coordinating all the authorities in our country. So of course, the Money Laundering Control Office is part of in this plan.
Thank you. And I think we have time for the last question, which would be it is interesting what would happen when we put religious groups into a beneficial ownership issue. Are there any international experience or cases? Can we have our friends from France and Lithuania try to tackle this question?
Well, I think I answered this question previously, but I see on the screen a very important question, which is, well, there are two questions on which I'd like to briefly comment. How can groups like Transparency International convince governments of the importance of openness? That's through global mobilization. We've been successful as a global civil society to mobilize on climate, and corruption is a harm to society exactly as carbon emissions are harm to the planet. So it's really through global public mobilization that we are trying to convince governments. And then is the information of the beneficial owners open to the public? No, not everywhere, and it is central. If it is not open to the public, it will be incomplete, it won't be accurate. We absolutely need public control on this information for this information to be useful. And it is not against the privacy. There are privacy laws that protect the citizens' private lives, but being the shareholder of a company is not something that's linked to this protection of privacy. It should be public as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, François, for your answer. I think that wraps up our Q&A session. And again, I would like to offer our sincere appreciation for our friends from France and Lithuania. and Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Justice to participate in today's panel. And we will take a short break and we'll come back to the next section. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.